Welcome back to the channel. Another broadcast. Paul, recovered addict, Peterhead, Scotland. Very pleased to be here, and I'm super pleased to be joined today by Lynn.
Hi, I'm Lynn. I'm an addict and an alcoholic from Southern California.
Lovely, welcome, and thanks for being here. So Lynn's going to be sharing her experience, strength, and hope, and a message of recovery and sobriety. So I just want to mention that there's various resources available. We have current male and female sponsorship lists. So if you're listening to this and you're looking for sponsorship, if you use your first name and then your number beneath wherever you see this post, and we will get back to you. There's also very healthy WhatsApp groups we can add you to, where there's a great deal of networking goes on and a plethora of resources and meeting information posted daily. So we can add you to that. During this podcast, there's going to be various readings on the screen. Bear in mind, you can pause, rewind, fast forward this, and share this with us however you will. And there'll also be information about how to get to meetings. So yeah, and there's lots of other podcasts. I believe there's a 100 podcasts now on the channel. This will be 101. Yeah, so do check out the other broadcasts. Maybe you're listening to this and you want to appear on this podcast. Well, you absolutely can do that. Just pop your first name, your number beneath this, and we will get back to you. So once again, it gives me great pleasure to hand the floor over to my friend Lynn. Over to you, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Paul. My name is Lynn, and I'm an addict and an alcoholic. And forgive me, everybody. I'm a little nervous this morning, so bear with me. I'll get into the swing here real quick, I'm sure. We'll start at the beginning. I come from a broken home. I'm the oldest of 4 children, and my parents got divorced when I was 6. When my mom went to work, this was 1974, so women had just gotten the right to have their own bank accounts in my country. So this is about the beginning of single moms, the early 70s. And my mom had no skills. And when my dad left, she had to go to work at jobs that she could get, which was working in bars. And she would come home after work and bring her company with her. And I think the first time I had a sip of alcohol was one of those nights when she brought friends home after work, and I was allowed to stay up late, and I helped her with the drinks, and I was the entertainment for the night. I had taken a couple of sips of her White Russian, and I think was maybe seven years old, and I became the life of the party, and I was the entertainment for the adults, and suddenly I felt loved and important. And I don't remember that, thinking that at the time, but when I look back, that's absolutely how I felt. Again, my mom worked 3 jobs as a single mom, and so needless to say, we were raised by babysitters. I don't want to get real specific, but we were sexually molested by those babysitters. And so at a very young age, I learned very mixed messages about real important things in life. They taught us fear, with the threats that if you tell anybody, it's going to be worse for you, you're going to get in trouble. So I learned how to lie at a really young age. And I found that, my mom had a very short temper, and she was not a very gentle mother. And I forget what I was going to say about that. But anyway, she was highly abusive. And again, this was part of what taught me how to be a liar. If I didn't want to get hit, if I didn't want to get screamed at, if I didn't want to get in trouble, then I would lie. And I discovered that lying really worked well for me. It would keep me from getting into trouble. And this was how I started my disease. It started, I guess I had taken my first drink at this point, but, I was not into the disease yet. But I definitely had this malady from a very young age. I learned how to do all sorts of things that are just not morally acceptable, and they were how I survived. So let's fast forward to the first time I used. My best friend's 13th birthday party, and I was 12 years old. And we went downtown Blaine to Shakey's for a pizza party. And some of the guys from the high school were there. And they said, hey, why don't you come over to our house? We're going to smoke some pot. And so, we went over there and we had a blast. I had the best time of my life. 12 years old, and I smoked pot for the first time, and I'm the life of the party, and I'm having fun, and we're doing cartwheels in this garden and having it was, I loved it. I loved it. And we get back to my best friend's house that night, and we go upstairs, and she needs to go down and get a drink of water. And she walks by her mother and her brother, and she breaks down crying and tells them everything that's happened. The brother comes upstairs, grabs me by the hair, and pulled me down the stairs and took me home. I'm never allowed to see my best friend again. I'm beaten and grounded. And all I can think about the next day is, how do I get a hold of that guy from the high school so I could do that again? None of the consequences deterred me. I just was desperate for that feeling again. And so that began my career in using drugs. About 15 years old, I tried cocaine for the first time and loved it. Graduated from high school at 18 by the skin of my teeth. I'd run away from home when I was 16 and managed to find a friend I could live with until I graduated. And so I did graduate from high school. But on my graduation night, I was supposed to go on a cruise, on the senior cruise. And I was so distraught at my graduation because my father didn't come that I decided to just go. I got someone to buy me a bottle of booze, and I sat in an alley and drank and cried all night on my graduation night. When I look back at some of the things that have happened to me, it's just such a sad, sad thing. I wish I'd had the opportunities that I could have if my life had been different, but I didn't. And so now I get to have life today. That's amazing, and we'll get to that. The drugging, after I graduated from high school, instead of going to college, I joined a traveling sales company. And I traveled around my country, knocking on people's doors, selling cleaner for 2 years. And I found out that I had a real skill, a real gift for selling things. I'm a good salesman. I can sell ice cubes to Eskimos. And I really loved that job for a while until I had a bad day and found out what the company was like. This is one of those old sales crews you heard about back in the 80s on 60 Minutes. And if you were doing great, you were a superstar. But if you weren't, it was hell. And that's what ended up happening. I had to call my sister to escape from that crew. It just got really abusive and really bad. And I came back home, and for a while I was doing pretty good. And then I started going up to Canada because drinking age in Canada was 19. And I started going to bars up in Canada. Excuse me. And I ran into a guy I had dated in high school. And trigger warning for anybody who's had domestic violence, but we went home from our first date and he raped me. And I moved in with him the next day. That was my sense of self-worth. I really believed that I was worth nothing and I deserved no better than what I'd gotten. And the best I could do for loving attention was a man who raped me. I was really messed up. So that ended up turning into a drug-fueled relationship. And I did get pregnant, and I have my son, my beautiful son that I have today. He's 34 years old. And my ex-husband was 6'8". I'm 5'3". And he was very abusive. And he threatened one day to disappear with my son. And then he left us, took the car and disappeared for a few days. And I decided at that time I was gonna get out of the situation. So I called my mother and she helped me get the money together, and I packed up and in an instant moved to California. And I got to California, and of course, you know, they call them geographics when we move around to get away from ourselves. And I did this geographic, and for a while it worked. Life was pretty good. I was doing well. I got a good job. And then I met a really good guy, and we moved in together. And this was a gentleman who had never done drugs and was not a drinker and had no experience with people like us. And I went from being the abusee to being the abuser. And he allowed me to quit my job and stay home with my son. And I took full advantage of that. And I started going out to bars and shooting pool and throwing darts and meeting people like I used to hang out with. And the time came when someone offered me methamphetamine. And they said, well, it'll help you stay up. It'll help you get the house clean. It'll help you lose weight. And all of these things, of course, were just sellers to me. So I was like, sure, let's give it a shot. And I started to go down that road, using methamphetamine, just snorting it at the time. And slowly things started to get a little worse. And the job that I had was starting to be in jeopardy. And then someone introduced me to smoking it. And that was pretty much the beginning of the end for me. When I started to smoke methamphetamine, it became the only thing. I had crossed that invisible line. It was the only thing that was important to me. I couldn't go 15 minutes without smoking from the time I started till the time I quit. It was immediate. And I kept chasing that escape that I felt the first time I took that first hit for a long time. I did that until I'd lost everything inside of me. My soul was empty and dead. I was scared of everything. I was getting ready to lose my child. My mother had seen what was happening with me, and she threatened to take him away if I didn't get my shit together. So, pardon my language. So what ended up happening was in California, actually in the United States, at the time Bill Clinton was president, and he initiated this law called welfare to work. And welfare is everybody knows what welfare is, but I was a welfare mom, and I took advantage of the system. And I'd gone through this program that the welfare to work GAIN program a couple of times already, but this is when it became a law. And so I had to go again, and I had to go find a job. And I sat in front of this gentleman's desk at the county office, and we talked for a long time. And he had known me from before, because again, like I said, I'd taken this course twice before. But then the second I get a job, I'd quit the job because I'd start using again. Anyway, so I'm at his desk, and he says, "Lynn, I just do not understand what the problem is. You're intelligent, you have a good education, you interview well, you have a good work history. What's going on? Why is it you start a job and then quit?" And in that moment, I had a moment of clarity and an opportunity to tell the truth for the first time. And I did. I started crying, and I said, I can't go to work and keep it because every time I get a paycheck, I go to the drug dealer's house and I smoke and I can't stop. And I was crying and telling the truth to this total stranger. And I wasn't worried. I was just telling the truth for the first time. I wasn't scared of what that was going to do. I was just grateful I was able to tell the truth. And what happened in that moment was a massive miracle. The man sitting across from me said, "Lynn, my name is Rado, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'd like to offer you a solution." And so we got me set up. We got me set up to go into rehab, and I was supposed to go into a rehab on Monday morning, a place called Cedar House. And so I got everything in order. My mom was going to take my son, and we got school switched in 3 days. And Monday came, and I showed up, and we called, and the bed had closed. So I felt like the gates of hell had closed on me in that moment. But what he said was, you can do this without that program. What you need to do is just not drink and use one day at a time. I want you to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I want you to come into drug court and test randomly, do a drug test randomly so we can monitor your progress. And if you test dirty, or if you miss a meeting in those 90 days, you're going to sign this paper and give up your rights to welfare in the state of California. And I grabbed the pen and I signed on the dotted line. And I did exactly what he suggested that I do. He sent me to an AA club called the Colton Club. And I went to AA meetings there every day. This was back in 1999. And I had a 7-year-old child. And I didn't have a car. And they didn't have Zoom meetings back then. And somehow I found a way to make it to a meeting every day. In fact, I still remember the number. I made 118 meetings in 90 days with a kid in tow. So it is possible. If you want to do this, you can find a way to do it, especially today with Zoom. There's a meeting on every minute of every day, and you can get to a meeting. So I'm really grateful for the progress with Zoom and the ability to go to a meeting anywhere today, because it was a lot harder work back in 1999. But I did what I was told to do, and I didn't drink or use, one day at a time. And as I was going to those meetings, I haven't worked on character defects yet, and I'm still using all these old behaviors I used to have when I was drinking and using, and I'm using them sober. And there was a gentleman there, and his name was Danny, and he was sharing, and he shared this amazing story, and I related, and I found hope in his story, and I fell in love, and I started chasing poor Danny around the meetings. And one day he said, "Hey, we're going to go to this other meeting tonight. Why don't you come check it out?" And when I showed up there, he said, "Hey, Lynn, come here. I'd like to introduce you to someone." And up stood a woman, and he said, "This is my girlfriend." And she introduced herself to me, and I was positive this woman was going to take me outside and kick my butt. But that's not what happened. What happened was the greatest demonstration of love in these rooms that I've ever seen. She held her arms out to me, and she said, "Can I hug you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Why don't you sit next to me tonight?" And so I sat next to her for the meeting, and she took her 4-year cake that night. And at the end of the meeting, she asked me if I needed a sponsor. And she became my sponsor that day. And I went to her house every Saturday morning, and we got together and we opened the big book and we did this work. And she took me through the book line by line, word by word. And it was the most beautiful experience I'd ever had. I got to read about myself in the pages of the big book. And I got to read about stories, how people have recovered from what I thought was going to be my life forever. And that they had different lives, and they were living successfully and enjoying their lives. They weren't miserable. And I found so much hope in reading the book. The problem was I wasn't really honest yet. I didn't quite understand how important honesty was. And so my sponsor, when we got up to step 4, she sent me off to do my columns. And I got home and I started to do a little work on it. And then I got a little tired of it, so I set it up on the shelf. And that's where it sat. And the next week she'd call and say, "Are you ready to get back over here and do your 4th step?" And I say, "Oh, well, I only did 1 entry in it." And I hadn't even done anything. I'd done nothing. I just kept lying. 2 years I did that. 2 flippin' years. I'm a hard case, guys. I was a hard case until I realized I was going to pick up again if I didn't do something. And so I went with a friend, and went to a 4th step workshop in LA. Back then, you had to drive an hour away from your home and spend the night somewhere to go to a workshop and spend $150. Today, you can get on one on Zoom every day. It's amazing. But I went to that workshop, and they taught me to sit and pray and focus and write. And they took me through the columns, 1 column at a time. And they broke it down and made it super easy for this very complicated addict who didn't want to ask for help. And I got the help I needed, and I finished that 4th step. And I read my 5th step to my sponsor. And when that happened, I don't want to say I had a spiritual awakening, but it was a spiritual experience for sure. It was raining on that day. And when I finished my 5th step, I'm not even kidding. The sky opened and the sun shone down and the rain stopped, and it felt like life was going to be okay for the first time. And I kept working the steps. And I got to step 9. And I need to tell you, when I got to 6 and 7, I didn't do a lot of work on it because I really didn't think I had any character defects. I did not understand what they were. I just couldn't separate my tools for living with my character defects. And so we get to step 9, and I've never really worked a thorough step 6 or 7, but I do step 8, and I become willing, and I make a very thorough list. And I go to do my amends. And when I do these amends, I tackle the massive ones first. I hit the welfare office. Like I said, I had cheated and abused the system for a lot of years. And before I got sober, I had worked at a job that I didn't report. And when you're on welfare, you need to report your earnings. And I had gotten a letter that they figured it out. They knew I was working and I wasn't reporting it, and they wanted to see me. Well, this was a felony amount of money that I had stolen from the government through welfare by cheating and lying. And I decided to tackle it first because if I'm going to go to jail, let's do it now. So I went in, and another miracle happened. As I'm standing at this desk with this woman, I read my 9-step script to her. And I told her, I need to make this right. Um, what can I do? And she looked at me and told me, normally this is an arrestable amount of felonious money that you've stolen from the government, and you should go to jail. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a payment arrangement with you. And she made a payment arrangement with me, and I paid $25 a month until I paid every penny back that I owed to the government for welfare fraud. For 7 years, I paid for that, and I've got the receipt on my refrigerator today because it's one of my biggest accomplishments. That was one of the first things I completed in my life that I actually finished. And that was a beautiful feeling to get that taken care of. Another thing I took care of when I got here, I had a suspended driver's license, no insurance, and bad tags on my car, and 3 failure to appears because I'd been pulled over and never went to court for them. So I went and took care of that. And I did weekends at Glen Helen, which is the prison up here. I went and did weekends work release, and I took care of that. And I got my license back. And then I got a job, and then I got a car, and life got good. And I went through and I made a few more amends, did the amends to my children and my ex-husband and my mother and my sister and my brothers, um, the lady I worked for, some of the stuff in my past I had to deal with. I made those amends. And I'm here to tell you the 9-step promises come true fast. And they did for me. And life changed real quick. And I decided I didn't need to do any more of the work. And it wasn't quite like that. I didn't make a decision like that, but I met the next him, and he became my higher power. And so I'm in the rooms. I'm 4 years sober, and I meet my next husband, and he's still drinking, but he starts to come to events with me and meetings with me, and on our wedding day, he's interested in the fellowship, and he really supports my recovery. But at the time, I had started to pull away. So he's introduced, but I've stopped going because I'm just more interested in my marriage. And then my children, he had a daughter and I have a son, and they were about the same age, 12 and 13, when we got together. And so there was a whole other set of things we had to deal with, and it was just so much. And I stopped working my program, and I started to just live in life on life's terms, which was a hot mess because I had no real tools. And the day came when we got married, and we went on our honeymoon to Maui, and the waiter asked what I would like to drink. And I was completely prepared for the moment. I knew I was going to order a virgin Mai Tai. And I said it just like that. I'd like a virgin Mai Tai, please. And he laughed at me. He laughed at me. No, don't you know that's just iced tea or lemonade or whatever it is? I don't even know what goes into Mai Tai. And in the moment, I was separated from my higher power. I was running on self-will. My husband was my new higher power. And I had no defense against the embarrassment that I felt when he laughed at me. And so my solution was to say, fuck it, give me a Mai Tai. And so in that moment, I relapsed and I threw 4 years of recovery and sobriety away. Well, 4 years of sobriety down the tubes. Unfortunately, I wasn't going to tell anybody. And so I kept showing up to the rooms and lying. And after that, we would take the kids to soccer games, and I could smell on some of the other parents the marijuana. And so I got brave. Of course, drinking wasn't enough. I'm going for the next thing. So I'd ask them, hey, do you smoke? And so then I started smoking pot with some of the moms and dads from soccer. So then my husband and I started smoking together. And we were out in the garage hiding one night, and his daughter walked out and caught us. And that was enough for him. He said, I need help. We need help. You need to tell the truth. I need to tell the truth. I'm gonna take a newcomer chip when you go to your meeting on Sunday. Well, that was when I was supposed to be taking my 5-year cake. Because again, I had not gotten honest in the rooms yet. And one of my good friends had made this had bought a beautiful cake for me. Had fresh flowers and roses on the top, just gorgeous. And we went to that Sunday night meeting. And when they asked for newcomers to identify, my husband raised his hand and identified. And I had told him before we went to the meeting, don't you tell anybody, because I'm taking that cake tonight. I got so sick again so fast after being disconnected from my program. And so he did. He went in and he didn't say anything about me, and he identified as a newcomer. And again, I got a moment of clarity, and I told the truth. And I started crying, and I said, I'm a liar. I don't deserve this 5-year cake. I'm a newcomer too. And I took a newcomer chip with my husband. He managed to stay sober and work an amazing program. I unfortunately was back into the disease. The allergy had got a hold of me. And even telling the truth in that moment wasn't enough. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to save face because my husband. So I kept lying, and I kept using, and he kept getting sober and better. And he decided that he needed to separate from me because it was going to affect his sobriety. That was really tough. We did end up getting divorced, and I did end up relapsing. And it was a hard time. But then I got sober again, and I hooked up with my old sponsor, and I went to a rehab, an outpatient rehab, where I actually just went for mental health. But then after I got honest with them, it became a dual diagnosis, and we treated my addiction. And I started to get better again, but I didn't get back into working the steps, so it didn't stick. And the time came when I met the new him, and the new him was a pot dealer. And we were sitting at his house one day after dinner, and I looked at him and I said, God, I just wanted, it was weird. Out of nowhere, the thought came, I just want to do a line of Coke. And he said, well, I can't get Coke, but I can get meth. And I looked at him and I said, if I do meth, I won't stop until I've lost everything or I'm dead. F it. And I smoked meth again. And it took 5 years to get back into these rooms. Over and over, I kept trying. The malady had grabbed massively a hold of me. And I had a whole brand new experience with hitting bottom. I had a bunch of experiences I'd never had before, which I won't get into in this interview. But suffice it to say, I hit a whole new set of bottoms. And January 19th of 2019, I was crawling past, I was trying to quit on my own again. And I was crawling past, I had a meth bong because, like I said, I smoked meth. And it was in the bathroom on the counter. And I would go from the bed to the bathroom to the kitchen, back to the bed, how you do when you're trying to come off. And as I looked at it, I was on about my 3rd day. And I looked at the bong on the counter and I just cried. And I dropped to my knees because I knew I was going to smoke again. And I was dying. I was literally dying inside. And I dropped to my knees and I screamed, God, help me. And a thought came, and it was a voice, and it was a voice. And it was the voice of my friend Jerry, who had passed away my first 4 years. She was my best friend in these rooms, and she just couldn't get it. And she ended up dying in a hotel room with a needle in her arm. But I heard that voice, and the voice, loud and clear, came through my head and said, call Chrissy. And so I did. I hadn't talked to Chrissy in probably 10 years. She was someone I'd met in the beginning of my sobriety, and she was Jerry's sponsor. And I had her number in my phone, but she wasn't someone I talked to or even thought about. But the thought came, call Chrissy. And I picked up my phone and I called her. and I cried, and I told her what was happening. And she walked me through flushing my down the toilet and breaking that bong and throwing it away. And we got me to my first meeting. And I came back to the rooms, desperate, dying, and hopeful. I knew that this was the place where I was going to be able to change my life again, because I'd seen what it had done for me before, and I'd seen what it had done for numerous people. And I knew I was saving my life coming back into these rooms. And it took a while before I gave up the reins on the marijuana. My current sobriety date is July 15 of 2019. And so that's, I came back January, but I got sober July. And when I finally put everything down and my sponsor started working with me on these steps again, I actually did the work. And I did it desperately. And that's not the truth. Oh, I got to tell you the truth. For the first 18 months, I kind of just did it a little half-assed. And then the pandemic hit. And here I am stuck at home alone. And I have no solution. Can't go to meetings. I was scared to death. And I'm back in my own head again. And I'm not connected to the fellowship. And I knew I needed to do something more. So I started going to the Zoom meetings, and I started to take service, and I started to participate in my recovery again. And I started doing the work in the steps that I had put off doing. And I started to attack it finally, like the dying do, that life preserver that's thrown to them. I grabbed onto it. And, I heard people share in meetings, the people who go out are the people who don't do the action. And that's right. That's so true. When I put these tools down, I don't move forward anymore, and I don't stay still. I roll backward. So anyway, I get back into the rooms, and I start going to meetings again, and I get done with these steps with my sponsor, and my life has started to really change. I worked a 6-step this time with so much thoroughness. Someone gave me a checklist of flaws and assets. And I didn't really understand what my character defects were until I saw this list. And I've got it up in front of me. I'm going to read a few of these off to you. Let's see. So the character defect side, pardon me, aggressive, angry, apprehensive, arrogant, boastful, careless, cheating, competitive, compulsive, conceited. And I'm going down this list going, oh my dear God, this is my entire personality. And my sponsor laughed at me and she says, yeah, that's about right. She showed me the other side of the list, which is the assets. She said, when you do your step 6, you're looking at these character defects. And yeah, baby, you got them all. But I have good news. Step 7 is what you get it. You get to turn them over to God, and you can ask God to help you replace it with the right asset. And I actually had a list to look at. So I could specifically pray to God to help me change these things, change my cheating for honesty, help me to change my conceited and self-important with humbleness and modesty, with humility. Help me to change my depression into cheerfulness. And I started to realize what the opposite of what I'd been doing was and what I was shooting for. And I started to pray to God for these things, so that it might help me to be more useful to Him and my fellows. And that was the caveat right there, the way I prayed. When I prayed selfishly, God do this, God do that, 7-Eleven, Santa Claus, God do what I say, things didn't get answered. The answer was often no. But when I started to ask for God to help me change things in my life so that I could be more helpful to others and so that I could show His love, things changed immediately. The big book talks about a mustard seed of willingness, I think. And I'm probably totally slaughtering the quote, but that mustard seed is one of the tiniest seeds in the world. It's like a grain of sand. And when I just became that willing, the door opened. When I started to believe that I could trust this higher power to change these things I desperately needed to change, and I got honest and I did the work, things changed. And And I got through my steps this time. For the first time ever, I did a step 10, and I learned about the importance of doing daily inventory. And I got to step 11, and I got to find out the importance of getting closer to my higher power and how important prayer and meditation are to my recovery and my well-being. And I developed a spiritual routine in my life that connects me with my higher power daily. And I don't struggle today. And it's just amazing the differences that have happened since I really actioned this program and trusted that my higher power would do the things I couldn't do. And guys, I couldn't do anything. I was literally that list of character defects. That was my whole personality. Every way I dealt with the world was wrong. But you guys showed me how to change that. And today, so let me get to step 12 first. I started getting sponsees and working my 12th step. And as I worked with these girls, my program, my recovery changed. It grew, it evolved. And every time I opened the book, I read something new and different, and it meant something extra and more beautiful. And I'm in awe at how amazing this program is. Watching, there's a part in the big book where it talks about the person in front of me. I couldn't bring myself to recognize who they were. They were not the person they were before. And as I'm working with these girls, I'm seeing that happen in front of my eyes. And it's just, I don't want to cry while I'm doing this, but it's the most beautiful blessing. It's such a humbling experience to be able to help people and watch them change their lives for the better and come out of that desperate despair hell that we lived in and come out hopeful and happy with solutions, not lost and stuck anymore. And that's what that 12th step does. It helps me help people get to that. And I have a purpose today. You know, when I went to therapy, because I do get outside help, I was talking to my therapist and we got to what my core belief about myself was. And my core belief was that I was just absolutely a useless piece of you know what. And she said, Lynn, why do you believe that? And I said, well, that was kind of my nickname. My mom would say, get your useless piece of over here. And I would come running. And that was my nickname. And I believed it. I owned it. The things she said to me, I believed. And my therapist said to me, I'm going to say something to you and I need you to be ready for it, but it's going to change everything. Your mom lied. Now what? And that changed my life. I don't have to believe the things that people said to me. You know, my mom was wrong. She was sick. She didn't have the tools I have. I prayed for her and I changed my attitude. The tools you guys have given me have changed everything. What used to be, how can I get revenge, is now, how can I be of service? That's a spiritual awakening. My thinking has changed. My responses and my reactions to life have changed. And I will be eternally grateful to this program for changing my life. And it just keeps getting better. It just keeps getting better, guys. I'm going to share this and be quiet. This week was election week in my country, and it didn't go the way I wanted it to. And what used to would have caused me to have a bad year only caused me to have a bad day, because I have tools today. And it wasn't even a full day. You know, by the end of the day, I was able to close my eyes and go to bed and wake up the next morning really hopeful. And that's amazing, because I didn't have any hope before I got into these rooms. My mom named me at birth. My name is Lynn Hope. My middle name is actually Hope. And I hated it until I got sober and got recovery. And now I'm so grateful for my middle name, because it reminds me to have hope every day. And today I do. Today I do, because I've seen the results of this program and what this work can do for changing someone's life. And it changed mine, and it can change yours. So, you know, how free do you want to be? Do the work. If you're new, get a sponsor. What that means is someone who has a working knowledge of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and has gone through the process of recovery and can show you how to do what they did to get what they got. And that's what I do today. And I'm grateful for that. And I think that's where I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Paul, for allowing me this platform and for allowing me to share today.
Appreciate you, Lynn. What a phenomenal share. I really did. I was with you every step of the way. It was everything from start to finish and very emotive. I found it very moving, to be straight with you. And yeah, crystal clear message of hope. And what a process you've been through, my friend. What a set of circumstances to emerge from, and yeah, just briefly, folks, on the screen is information about how to get to meetings. And Lynn has mentioned the virtue and value, the substance of meetings. In meetings, we get a check up from the neck up. We learn about the problem. We learn about the solution. We get right sized. We hear hope. We hear courage. We have identification. We hear solution. CA is a progressive solution focused process where we do usually suggest getting through the steps in a matter of weeks, not rather than months and months usually, and that's shown the best results. And on the screen there, those meetings are on every single day. The UK Samaritans was there, as is the CA UK helpline, also ca.org and canonymous.org.uk. So maybe you're new to CA and you're listening to this message. They're public meetings. Everybody is welcome. I'm not aware that you'll be required to put the camera on at any of those meetings there. Some obscure meetings do, but most do not. So you're absolutely welcome to go along and simply listen in. If you so wish, and you can hear wonderful people like Lynn share their message of hope, faith, and courage. So, yeah, once again, if you're here, we've just had you to explain to us what sponsorship is. If you're looking for sponsorship, give us your first name and your number beneath wherever you see this, and we will get back to you with a sponsorship, male or female sponsorship list. Lynn, that was epic. It really was. I've heard a lot of shares, but that was so wisely put and clearly explained, and you mentioned one of the things that caught my attention is sponsorship, and you framed it beautifully, the enjoyment of sponsorship and the wonder of it, and it got me thinking, really, because like yourself and I have the privilege of working with others on a daily basis, and none of us are experts, and sometimes I find it challenging, I really do, and usually I don't, but occasionally I do. And, you mentioned there where you had a difficult day where earthly circumstances seemed challenging, and perhaps your mind was projecting this and that. And most people are often wrong and emotionally challenged every day. Tomorrow, there'll be some new things for us to fret about, and yesterday, I sometimes think to myself, what was I worried about yesterday? Oh, yes. And it turned out to be a storm in the teacup. I was making a huge mountain out of a molehill, which I still can do. I absolutely still can do. It's always an option. I haven't had the obsession to drink a drug for God's my witness for quite some time. But that doesn't mean that the underlying spiritual malady doesn't manifest. Of course it does. We wouldn't be human if it didn't. Of course it does. It's progress, not perfection. And I so enjoyed hearing you today. And I knew it'd be a barn burner. I knew it'd be really good. And I appreciate all you're doing. It's always wonderful to hear you. So yeah, you talked about sponsorship, and you talked about the joy of seeing other people recover, and I think you was inferring teaching these steps, because that's what we do in the meetings. We teach the steps. The purpose of the group is to teach and practice the steps, and sponsors teach the steps. That's what we do. And my job in some ways is to put myself out of a job. My job is to try and communicate, not intensely, but intensively, as much as the other person can absorb, so that they stand on their own 2 feet as a recovered man or a recovered woman accountable to God. You understand? That's my job. That's how I see it anyway. It's not to make them codependent on me. It's so that they can become happy, joyous, and free. And the steps are footsteps towards God, the footsteps with God, so that you can learn to walk with God, and so that you can stand on your own 2 feet in God's power, accountable to God as a recovered free man or a woman. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about teaching the steps and how you found it further emancipating, further freedom giving and peace giving, joy giving, Lynn?
I'd love to. Thank you, Paul, for that question. Being a sponsor, it's interesting. The other day I was sitting and I just finished doing step work with a sponsee, and my son walked by and he had been kind of listening from the other room a little bit, and he goes, Mom, you're a really good teacher. And I thought, first I was just shocked that my son had a compliment to give me, but that was the compliment he gave. Really humbled me. I am. And then he said something else. You always know the right thing to say to your sponsees. And that's not me. That's not me. That is my higher power. It is partially me. It's my experience. I've got 56 years of experience to give these ladies, and a couple of lifetimes I've lived in those 56 years. And God's given me the ability to turn that into usefulness. I've taken my dark past and I've turned it into a light for other women. And as I walk through these steps and go through the book, I'm reminded, bottom of page 18 instructs me on how I'm supposed to sponsor. That I show them that I know what I'm talking about, that everything about me shouts that I have an answer, that I have no holier than thou attitude, that I'm not talking down to them or being condescending, nothing but the desire to be helpful. No fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, and no lectures to be endured. I love these instructions. They tell me how to approach the new person. And it tells us these are the conditions we found most effective. And I paid attention to that line in there. I want to be effective today. So I'll talk about how I take the sponsees through the book a little bit. My very first sponsor, when we opened the big book, she told me to leave my front page completely blank. And the reason for that is because when I open my big book, I need to remember that page that's blank is everything I know about staying clean and sober before I open this book. And I love that because I like to think I know some stuff, but I don't. The book has the answers. I have experience. The book has the answers. And then we go and we get to the Alcoholics Anonymous first title page. And she has me write this. The process outlined in the first 164 pages of this book contain precise directions on how I can recover from alcoholism or drug addiction. That's pretty important stuff. I'm getting precise directions in the first 164 pages. Then she had me turn to the next title page where it says how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And we drew the circle and the triangle on that page. And she talked to me about the three sides of this disease, that this is a threefold illness, body, mind, and spirit. And I talked to my girls about this because I think it's so important to understand that we need to treat all three sides of that disease. And the triangle represents how we do that. And in the center of that triangle is God. And I love how she broke it down. And this is what I tell the girls. The unity is to treat the body. You take the body to the fellowship to treat the physical allergy. And the 12 traditions are for the body. Recovery. Take your mind into the recovery process. The first 164 pages of this book to treat the obsessions of your mind. The 12 steps are for the mind. And then service. Take the awakened spirit into service by sharing and sponsorship. The 12 concepts are for service. We have tools right here in front of us, and all of it's in this big book. And then I don't go straight to the doctor's opinion. I go through the preface and the forewords. And I usually start, my first assignment I give the girls is in the end of the preface. And there's a couple of sentences at the very end. It says, if you have a drinking problem, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. Or more important, yes, I felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too, where I see a message of hope. And then we go to the back of the book, because that's what it's telling us to do, to look at the 42 personal stories. That's what the back of the book is. And I have them pick a story randomly. And then I want them to read it And usually the stories in the back of the book, when you read them just to read them, you're like, oh, I don't have anything in common with this person. But if you look at these 3 questions, yes, that happened to me. Yes, I felt like that. Or yes, I believe this program can work for me too. And you go through the story and highlight those 3 things, the powerful thing that happens is you see just how you relate to everybody in these rooms. You will read your own story in the story of someone that you have nothing at all in common with. It's 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 the cement that binds us. And I want them to know we're not terminally unique, guys. Everyone sitting in these rooms is the same. Everybody who wrote the stories in these books, we're all the same. Even though we have all these differences, our disease is the same and our solution is the same. So I love that exercise. And I don't mess around. I go through the forewords, do a lot of highlighting. I'm really interested in the history. I like how it ties together with the back of the book. And when I teach the girls that I work with, I teach them with the intention of showing them how to teach the next person. And that's my goal, is to get them to a point where they can use their dark past to be a bright light for someone else. So I think that's what I got on that. Thanks for your question.
Thank you very much. Yes. And if there's anyone new, that was beautiful. If there's anyone new here listening to this, if you're new to recovery and you're not sure how to proceed, if you can get to face-to-face CA meetings or AA meetings, 12-step meetings, go along as soon as you can. That would be my strong suggestion. If you can possibly get to in-person meetings, get to them. If not, or as well as, Zoom meetings are absolutely phenomenal. There is stacks and stacks, and there's probably 200 of them on right now, and the message is being carried in the public. They're completely free to attend, and you can come late, leave early, log in, log out, and you certainly won't be expected to share. You can do if you wish, and a lot of networking happens, and we do strongly suggest men with men, women with women, and recovery happens in our meetings, and so yeah, if there's anybody new, I had to get rigorously honest about the problem in order to appreciate and appropriate the solution and make a commitment to it. It's really the language of the heart, acceptance of how unmanageable the lifestyle is. The reason why is if I ingest any alcohol or other drugs whatsoever, it sets off a chain event of if I take a drink, the drink takes a drink, and the drink takes me, or if I take a drug, the drug wants a drug. Then the drugs want me. It sets off this allergy, this illness, this physical craving, and the mind obsesses about it and capitulates and goes in with this physical yearning. And 1,000 is never enough, because one is too many. Because it sets off that allergy, you see, and as a result, I have consequential events and circumstances that, whilst I may like the effects produced, I don't like the consequences produced, you see. So I'm then at the jumping off point where the only mode of transport is a leap of faith, and I'm willing to make a commitment and grab a hold of that life belt that Lynn mentioned, life preserver, I think they call them abroad, and grab a hold of that, the desperation of someone that's drowning and get some help. And, Silkworth, in the doctor's opinion, he says the basis of the fellowship, the thing he points out isn't steps or even meetings per se, or literature. He said it's one alcoholic sharing their ideas about recovery with another alcoholic, or one addict with another addict. And that's what we do. We share our understanding and appreciation of getting and staying clean. And other people hear it, and slowly but surely, faith's like a muscle. It grows with usage, and people become emboldened and eventually become convinced that they too can recover. And find a new lifestyle. And millions have, they reckon, probably 20 million folk over 80 years of this wonderful, the 12-step program have found freedom and a new lifestyle. So what I would like to do, Lynn, is invite you to come back in to summarise or to share with our listeners from this in a very general way before we wrap up today's broadcast.
I apologize, Paul. What am I sharing about? Just to wrap up?
So we've got, just take a couple of minutes to share what's on your heart, if you wish, with our listeners before we bring proceedings to a close.
Very good. I'd be happy to do that. Thank you again, Paul. So again, Lynn, addict, alcoholic, and you know what? The last thing I want to share about as I wrap this up is that higher power thing, because I didn't share about it much in my main share. I struggled with the higher power idea. Phone is ringing, and I need to decline it. Of course, that completely threw me off, and I forgot where I was going. Apologies, everybody. Oh, the higher power. So when I got here, I believed that my higher power was the God of my childhood. And like I shared before, the prayers that I used were very selfish. And I didn't believe that that God answered prayers. And so I had to come up with a new concept. And in Bill's story, it talks about when he's meeting with Ebby, and Ebby just shouts at him. He's so tired of Bill, excuse, excuse, excuse. Why don't you just come up with your own conception of God? And that changed our entire program. That made this program available to every single person walking the planet. I'm one of those people walking the planet. And I had a real struggle with this for a while until, again, like I shared before, I did that 11th step finally. And what I did was I paid $1,000 to my therapist to do a Mastery of Manifestation course with her. And I didn't want to manifest a home or a job. I wanted to manifest a spiritual routine in my life that was going to bring me closer to a God of my own understanding. And when I got willing and I started to do the work that she gave me, what happened was I discovered what my higher power was. And it's not the same God I used to believe in. It's a different thing. And as I go through the work, that higher power evolves and it changes. But for me, it's a source. And it's what it describes in the spiritual experience in the back of the book. It's a source of love, inspiration, calm, peace, all the things I was missing. That's what my higher power has just been dying to have me use. But I've stuffed all of these things, these worldly things, my malady has gone in top of my connection with that higher power. And as I do the steps, that stuff gets out of the way and I can hear this source more clearly. And I'm grateful that I finally got out of my own way and decided to listen to what it said in the big book, what Ebby said to Bill. Choose your own conception of God and then get willing and do the work. And that's the best advice I can give to anybody. Follow some directions that you don't want to follow. Do the work you don't want to do, even when you don't want to do it. And your life will change. My life has changed 100%. My family didn't talk to me 5 years ago. Now my son lives with me and pays half my bills. My daughter, my grandchildren, my mother, they all talk to me today and love talking to me. And I can keep outside issues. I've taken the tools I've learned in these rooms and I use them in my relationships with my family and my friends today. And I don't step on the toes of my fellows anymore. And the results are a happy life. And I'm really grateful for this program. Thank you so much, Paul.
Lovely. Thanks, Lynn. Okay, family, stay strong. Come to some meetings. That was a beautiful share, Lynn. Appreciate you taking time to be with us here today. That was absolutely wonderful. Yeah, so come to some meetings, family. Get involved. Keep taking action. Stay in prayer. More will be revealed. And God will move your mountain, but you'll have to bring a shovel. Some days you might not need it because God is very, very gracious. The solution is in the steps, it's in the literature, and really in the power of the source, So, yeah, God can do for you what you can't do for yourself, but you'll have to do for yourself what God has given you power to do. Yeah, we have to be responsible and suitable and show up and take that consistent action to get consistent freedom. Beautiful share. Okay, family, stay strong in the solution, and we'll be back soon with another broadcast.